I never imagined I'd be sitting here, my hands trembling so bad I could hardly hold my phone steady, trying to process what I just saw. My wife, Lisa, has always been the kind of person who seemed to care about appearances. She's polished, charming, the social butterfly at every party. That's why when my dad died suddenly last week, I thought she'd be there with me, holding my hand, crying with me. Instead, she was somewhere else entirely. The funeral was supposed to be a quiet, somber affair. Just family, a few close friends. I remember the cold wind biting into my skin as I stood there, watching the casket lower into the ground. My stomach was a stone. I felt numb, like my insides had shut down. I didn't notice Lisa slipping away until I saw the faint glow of her phone screen beneath the brim of her hat. She was texting someone, fingers flying fast. That alone wasn't strange. Everyone's glued to their phones these days. But the way she kept sneaking looks around, almost like she was hiding something, rubbed me the wrong way. I thought maybe she was comforting someone or maybe she was just anxious. But then, I saw the name pop up on her screen. Mike. That's her boss, the guy she's been working for the past year. I knew she'd been climbing the corporate ladder, flirting with him at work events, laughing a little too hard at his jokes. But I never thought she'd do something like this, during my father's funeral no less. I was rooted to the spot, stomach twisting, feeling the world tilt. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Her fingers kept typing, the messages quick and casual but intimate enough to make my blood boil. I strained to see the words, something about missing him, can't wait to see you and hope nobody notices. My heart pounded so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. My palms were sweaty, cold against the rough fabric of my pants. It hit me like a punch in the gut. My wife was betraying me right here, right now. During the one moment I needed her most, she was secretly texting her boss. The grief, the pain I was feeling, it all turned into rage, a fiery sensation that started in my chest and spread through my arms. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I wanted to grab her phone, to scream at her, to shake her until she understood how much she'd hurt me. But I stayed still, watching her hide the phone as she looked around nervously. When she finally slipped the phone into her purse and turned back to me, her face was calm, maybe a little too calm, almost as if she'd been caught but was pretending it didn't matter. I kept my eyes fixed on her. "Where were you?" I asked, voice thick with anger I couldn't hide. Her smile was forced. "Just chatting with a friend, you know how work can get." I wanted to throw her words back in her face. Her friend was her boss, I knew it. I could see it in her eyes. She thought she was clever, hiding her phone, lying through her teeth. But I wasn't stupid. Not anymore. That moment marked the beginning of something I couldn't ignore. I realized the woman I married, the person I thought I knew, had been lying to my face all along. That realization was like a cold splash of water, waking me up from a nightmare I never thought I'd be caught in. I had to do something, and fast. I couldn't let her get away with this, especially not during a time when I needed her support the most. As I walked away from her, my mind was already spinning with plans. Revenge, sure, but first I needed proof, a clean way to expose her. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of anger and calculation. I started noticing little things, her phone always at her side, unexplained absences, vague excuses. I knew I had to be careful. The last thing I wanted was for her to catch wind of my suspicions. But how do you confront someone who's lying so smoothly? I'd been married to her for 5 years, trusted her with my life. And now, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, left to wonder how deep the lies went, and if I was even married at all. I wasn't planning on just letting her get away with it. No, I needed to make her regret every second she thought she could cheat behind my back. The plan was already taking shape, cold, calculated, and precise. I just didn't know how it was going to end. I only knew I couldn't stay silent, not anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw her face, calm, almost amused, like she thought she was untouchable. My stomach was a knot and my palms kept sweating whenever I thought about how easily she'd lied, how comfortable she was sneaking behind my back with her boss, Mike. I kept going over everything I saw at the funeral, replaying it like some sick highlight reel. I knew I couldn't just confront her outright without proof. That wouldn't work. She was too slick, too practiced at hiding what she wanted to hide. I had to get inside her head, figure out how deep this went. Hell, I even started questioning myself. Had I missed signs before? Was I just blind? No. Deep down, I knew better. There were red flags I'd ignored, moments I brushed aside because I didn't want to believe she was capable of cheating on me. But now I had proof she'd been texting him during one of the worst days of my life, during my dad's funeral. That was the last straw. I decided I'd have to dig deeper, find some concrete evidence that would leave no room for doubt. I needed her to slip up again, and I had a feeling I knew how to make that happen. The next morning, I woke up early and started poking around her phone. She kept it close, always within reach, like a lifeline. I knew I couldn't just grab it without risking her catching on. Instead, I waited. I gave her a reason to forget to take it with her. That evening, she went out to get groceries. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hall, then I slipped into her purse, my heart pounding like a drum. It was like sneaking into enemy territory. The purse was soft leather with a faint smell of lavender, her favorite scent. I quickly found her phone, unlocked it with the fingerprint I'd memorized a long time ago. I scrolled through her messages slowly, trying to keep calm. There were more texts from Mike, more than I'd seen yesterday. Cheeky, intimate, almost flirtatious. I froze when I saw a recent one. Can't wait to see you tonight. No one will bother us. My stomach sank. That was the confirmation I needed. I felt a rush of adrenaline, hot and sharp. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. She was planning to meet him, probably behind my back, right under my nose. I looked around the apartment, quiet, too quiet, and my fists clenched. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just betrayal, it was like she'd been laughing at me all along, pretending to be the perfect wife, the devoted support during my grief, while behind the scenes she was sneaking around with her boss. I had to act fast. I knew I couldn't confront her directly yet, not without more proof. I needed to set things up, catch her in the act, or at least force her to show her true colors. I took screenshots of the messages, backed them up on my laptop, and deleted them from her phone. I didn't want her to find out I'd been snooping, at least not yet. That was a game I'd play later. Right now, I just wanted the evidence to be undeniable. I also checked her social media. Sure enough, her posts hinted at secret meetings, coded messages about working late or meeting a client. By the time she came home that night, I was already planning my next move. I couldn't just accuse her outright. She'd deny everything, play the victim, and I'd be back to square one. No, I needed to catch her red-handed, or at least get her to slip up again. When she entered, I kept my tone steady but cold. "We need to talk," I said. She looked surprised, maybe even nervous. "What's wrong?" I crossed my arms. "I know about Mike. I saw the messages." Her face flickered, a flash of panic, but then she quickly masked it. "You went through my phone," she whispered, voice trembling. "I saw enough. You've been lying to me, Lisa. I've been there for you through everything. And this is what I get, a wife cheating during my dad's funeral." She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's not what it looks like. I was just talking. Yeah, I've heard enough. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want out." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. My chest was tight, my vision blurred around the edges. I was furious, betrayed, disgusted. But I knew I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I needed to make her regret this. I had to show her I wasn't going to be her fool or her doormat. That's when the plan started forming, cold, calculated, and ruthless. I'd get everything I needed to end this once and for all. And when the time came, she'd wish she'd never crossed me. I looked at her, trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance, and knew I'd make her pay for this betrayal, one way or another. The next few days were a blur of planning and quiet rage. I couldn't eat much. My stomach twisted into knots every time I thought about her lying to my face, sneaking around behind my back. I kept replaying that moment at the funeral, the way her fingers flew over her phone, the flirtatious texts, her nervous glances, everything. I knew I had to be smart about how I responded, so I kept my cool, pretending to be the understanding husband. But inside, I was calculating every move. I started watching her more carefully, noticing the subtle shifts in her behavior. She was tense, jumpy even when I was around. She'd lie about her whereabouts, claim she was working late or meeting clients. But I knew better now. I'd seen the evidence. I just needed her to slip again to make a mistake that would be unmistakable. I was determined to catch her in the act, or at least make her feel cornered enough to confess. One evening, I decided it was time to escalate. I went out, bought a small voice recorder, one of those tiny devices that could hide easily in a pocket. I wasn't planning on spying forever, just enough to get her talking, maybe revealing something she didn't mean to. I knew she'd be more relaxed when she thought she had the upper hand, and that's when I'd get what I needed. The next night, I set up my plan. I told her I had to go out for a beer with the guys, but instead I stayed home, pretending to relax in the living room. I placed the recorder on a shelf near her, angled toward where she would be sitting. I wanted her to forget about it, to just be herself. As I listened from the other room, I heard her voice. She was on the phone with Mike. Her words made my fists clench. "Tonight has to be perfect," she whispered. "I can't mess this up. If he finds out, it's over." My stomach dropped. She was planning to meet him again behind my back, this time with more at stake. I pressed record, eyes dark with fury. She kept talking, her voice low but filled with anticipation. "I'll tell him I'm working late, but I'll meet him at the park, just for an hour or two. Then I'll come back and we'll act like nothing happened." I could barely breathe. That was it. I had enough. The proof was right there, echoing in my ears. She was planning her next secret rendezvous while I was out of the house, pretending everything was fine. That's when I knew her game was up. I waited until she hung up, then I confronted her directly. She looked surprised, maybe even a little guilty, but she quickly masked it. "What's wrong now?" she asked, voice trembling just enough to be fake. "You lied about working late," I said, voice cold. "You're meeting him tonight, aren't you?" "That's why I set up the recorder. I want the truth." Her face flickered with panic. "It's not what you think." "Oh, I think I know exactly what's going on." I cut her off. "You're cheating on me, Lisa. During my father's funeral, while I was mourning, you were planning to sneak off with your boss. How could you?" She stared at me, eyes wide, then her face hardened. "You're crazy. You're just paranoid." "Am I? I've got the proof right here," I said, pulling out my phone to play back the recording. Her eyes darted, but she didn't try to grab it. Instead, she dropped her shoulders, defeated. "You're going to ruin everything," she whispered, voice trembling. "Good. That was exactly what I wanted." I wasn't finished, far from it. I had to make her understand she'd crossed a line she couldn't come back from. I told her calmly but firmly, "I want you out of my house by the end of the week. Don't bother trying to lie or beg. I've seen enough." She looked at me, tears pooling in her eyes, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This wasn't about anger anymore, it was about justice. She'd betrayed me, and I was going to make sure she paid. The fallout started immediately. She begged, pleaded, tried to spin some story about stress at work, but I wasn't buying it. I handed her a set of keys to her own apartment, told her to pack her things and leave. I didn't want her around me anymore. The betrayal was too deep. As she gathered her things, she kept crying, whispering, "You'll regret this," but I knew I wouldn't. I'd already made my choice. I was done. Walking her to the door, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. I'd taken control, finally, and I knew I'd never let her do this to me again. I closed the door behind her, listening to her muffled sobs, and for the first time since everything happened, I could breathe. That night, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, the silence deafening but also freeing. I finally saw everything clearly. I'd loved her, trusted her, but she'd broken that trust in the worst way possible. I realized then that sometimes the only way to move forward is to cut out what's rotten. And as I looked around at the empty space, I knew one thing for sure. I'd never let anyone hurt me like that again. The days after she left felt like walking through a fog, half numb, half angry, trying to piece together what had happened. Honestly, I'd never felt so raw in my life. Every time I thought about her sneaking around, her voice whispering promises to Mike, a cold wave of fury would wash over me. It was like I'd been betrayed not just by her, but by everything I thought I knew about us. I kept replaying that night, that confrontation. Her tears, her trembling voice, how she tried to deny everything to save face, that image burned in my mind. But I wasn't buying her act anymore. I had enough proof, enough rage, enough disbelief to fuel me for what I knew I had to do next. I wasn't just cutting her out. I was planning to make her regret ever crossing me. I didn't want her to walk away victorious, thinking she'd played me for a fool. No, I needed to send a message she wouldn't forget. That's when the idea of revenge took shape, a slow, deliberate, calculated game. I wasn't interested in petty revenge or childish schemes. I wanted her to feel the sting of her betrayal deep, in her bones. I started by gathering everything I could find about her, her social media accounts, her email, her phone. I wanted every possible piece of dirt, every detail that could turn this from a breakup into a lesson she'd never forget. I even hired a private investigator, nothing invasive, just enough to get some dirt on her new life, her plans, her contacts. I wanted her to realize I wasn't going to play nice anymore. Meanwhile, I kept my own plans close. I knew she'd try to spin some story to her friends, maybe say I was overreacting or that she was under a lot of stress. Good. That was exactly what I needed, her to keep talking so I could gather more. I also reached out to a few people close to her, friends she'd confide in. I wanted to plant tiny seeds, make her look guilty even if she was still trying to keep her reputation intact. One day I found out she'd already started moving on, posting pictures on social media with some guy, acting like she was over everything. But I saw through it. I knew her too well. That's when I decided to take the next step. I set up a fake email account, one that looked like it belonged to an influential figure in her company. I crafted a message, nothing overt, just enough to pique her interest. I told her I knew what she was doing, that I had evidence, and that I'd be watching. I sent the message late at night, knowing she'd check her email first thing in the morning. I wanted her to know I was serious. The next day, her reaction was priceless. She immediately contacted me, trying to deny everything. I played along, pretending I didn't know I was onto her, and she started slipping. Little slips, her voice shaking when she answered, her hurried messages trying to cover her tracks. I kept pushing, dropping hints that I had more than just her texts, things I'd found in her hidden apps, private conversations she thought were secret. I told her I knew about her plans, her upcoming meetings, her special nights with Mike. I wanted her to panic, to realize she wasn't going to get away with this. I also contacted her boss, Mike, indirectly, just enough to let him know I was aware of his role in her betrayal. Not to threaten, but to make him nervous. I wanted him to understand I wasn't some pushover. I was building a case, one that would blow her entire life apart if I decided to go that route. I had enough evidence to make her lose everything, her job, her reputation, her marriage. As I sat back watching her scramble, I felt a dark satisfaction creeping in. She thought she was untouchable, that her lies would stay hidden forever. But I was showing her that I was no fool. I was relentless, a wolf stalking its prey, and if she thought she could keep cheating, she'd better think again. I knew the final move was coming, something that would leave her with no way out, but I wasn't rushing it. Patience was key. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that I was serious about destroying the lie she'd built around herself. For now, I'd keep feeding her small doses of fear and guilt, watching her unravel bit by bit. And as I watched her try to hold everything together, I realized I was finally taking control. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself from the wreckage she'd left, because the truth was, there's only so much betrayal a person can take, and I'd reached my limit. Over the next week, I watched her carefully, letting her think she was still in control. She was frantic, trying to cover her tracks, but I had everything I needed: screenshots, recordings, her own words. Every day, I felt that familiar fire grow hotter, knowing I was getting closer to the moment I'd finally make her see the damage she'd done. The most satisfying part was watching her slowly unravel. She'd sit on the couch trying to act normal, but her hands would tremble when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd dart her eyes around the room, checking if I was onto her. She was nervous, and I loved every second of it. The best part, I had her convinced I was just as clueless as she wanted me to be. One night, I decided it was time to make my move. I'd set up a meeting with her boss, Mike, under the guise of needing to discuss some work issues. I knew he'd be nervous, and I wanted to make him sweat a little. I also planned to confront Lisa directly, with everything I'd gathered, in a way that would leave no room for her to deny or escape. That evening, I called her and said I needed to meet her at a local cafe. She responded with a nervous okay, and I could feel her tension through the phone. Her hands shook slightly when she responded, "I'll be there." I knew she was scared, maybe even panicked, and that was perfect. When she arrived, I was already sitting in a corner booth, waiting. She looked tense, trying to appear composed but failing. I waved her over and she slid into the seat across from me. Her face was pale, eyes darting, trying to gauge what I knew. "I want to talk," I said softly, "about everything." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "What do you mean?" "You've been lying to me, Lisa," I said, pulling out my phone and playing the recordings I'd made. Her face drained of color when she heard her own voice, her planning, her promises to Mike, her lies about working late. She froze, eyes wide with shock. "That's not what it looks like." "Oh, I think it is." I interrupted. "You've been sneaking around, cheating on me during the worst time in my life, and you think you can just brush it off." She looked like she wanted to cry but didn't dare. "I was stressed, okay? I didn't mean for it to get this far." "Too late for that," I said, voice cold. "I've got everything, and I mean everything, your texts, your plans, your meetings, everything." Her shoulders slumped and she looked down. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Sorry doesn't cut it," I snapped. "You've betrayed everything we had, and I'm not going to stand for it." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle in. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a set of keys. "You can pack your things, Lisa, because you're out of here. Don't bother contacting me again." Her eyes flooded with tears, but she nodded silently. She knew she'd lost. I watched her gather her purse, her trembling hands fumbling with the zipper. Part of me felt cold, relieved but also strangely empty. As she left the cafe, I stayed behind, watching her retreating figure. My stomach twisted, but I felt more alive than I had in years. This was justice, I told myself. She finally got what she deserved. The next morning, I went to the apartment and handed her the keys along with some final words. "Don't come back. Take whatever you need and leave. I don't want to see you again." That act felt like closing a chapter I'd been stuck in for too long. I felt a strange weight lift off my chest, like I'd finally reclaimed myself from the wreck she'd created. Now I sit here, thinking about everything. I know she's probably kicking herself, but honestly, I don't care anymore. I've learned that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. And sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away, knowing you're better off without someone who would betray you when you needed them most. I realize that sometimes the only way to end the pain is to cut the cord completely. No angry shouting, no dramatic scenes, just a quiet, decisive step forward. That's what I did, and honestly, it's the only thing that's helped me start healing. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was waking up from a nightmare I'd been stuck in for years. The house, once filled with her presence, suddenly felt empty but somehow lighter. It was strange at first. I kept expecting her to walk in, to say something, to try to justify what she did. But she didn't. She was gone, and I was left with the silence which, after so long, finally felt peaceful. I took a long, deep breath one morning, sitting alone in the living room. My hands rested on my thighs, and I finally let myself feel the relief I'd been suppressing. The anger, the betrayal, they still lingered somewhere deep inside, but they didn't control me anymore. I had taken my power back. That was the part I kept thinking about. I had done that myself. I'd been patient, calculating, relentless. I'd turned heartbreak into a weapon of my own making. I had to face the world now with a new clarity. I didn't want to dwell on what I'd lost, but rather what I'd gained myself. That realization was strangely freeing. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I'd also learned something crucial. I was stronger than I thought. I went through her things that morning, not out of spite, but because I needed closure. I found a box of her stuff, clothes, mementos, some jewelry, most of it meaningless now. I carefully boxed everything, handed her the keys, and made a simple decision. This chapter was closed. I didn't want any reminders of her, not anymore. I walked to the door, took one final look around, and then closed it behind me. As I stepped outside into the fresh air, I felt the sun on my face for the first time in ages. It was like finally breathing freely after holding my breath so long. I knew I'd face a long road ahead, but I also knew I'd come out on the other side stronger. I didn't need her to define me. I'd define myself now. The truth is, betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches hard lessons. I learned that trust is fragile, that sometimes love isn't enough to survive deception. But I also learned that revenge, when done for the right reasons, isn't about hurting someone else. It's about reclaiming your dignity. I didn't want her to think she could get away with it, and I didn't want to carry the weight of her lies anymore. I want to tell anyone reading this, if you're going through something similar, trust your instincts. Never ignore the red flags, no matter how much you love someone or how much you want things to work out. If your gut says something's wrong, listen. Protect yourself first. Because in the end, the only person who truly has your back is you. Don't be afraid to walk away, to fight for your peace, and to take control of your life again. I still feel a sting inside sometimes, but it's not as sharp anymore. It's a reminder of how far I've come. That pain is part of the process, proof that I survived and I'm stronger for it. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'm finally free from the lie, and I'm finally ready to rebuild what I thought I'd lost. That's all I need now. Just me, a new beginning, and the knowledge that I didn't let her betrayal define me. I chose to end it, and I chose to move forward. And honestly, that's the only revenge I ever needed.